Listen carefully. If Allah took someone out of your life, this message is for you. Not for the person who left. Not for the one who hurt you. For you. Because right now you're confused. You're replaying conversations. You're questioning yourself. You're asking why Allah allowed it. And deep inside, there's a quiet fear that maybe you lost something you were supposed to keep. You didn't. Allah does not make mistakes with removals. Sometimes what feels like loss is actually Allah answering a dua you were too attached to let go of yourself. Let me speak to you directly now. Listen carefully. This is where most people misunderstand what's happening to them. Allah removes people when they become a distraction from Him, not when they are obviously bad, sinful, or toxic. That's the part you struggle to accept. You keep asking, but they weren't evil. They didn't do anything wrong. So why did Allah allow this to end? And that question itself reveals the problem. The danger is rarely obvious. Some relationships don't pull you away from Allah loudly. They do it quietly, slowly, gently, so gently that you don't notice your heart shifting until it already has. You still pray. You still say Allah's name. You still call yourself a believer. But your emotional center moves. Your first thought when you're happy is them. Your first refuge when you're hurt is them. Your fear of losing them becomes stronger than your fear of displeasing Allah. Without realizing it, you begin to rely on a human heart the way you were meant to rely on Allah. And that is where Allah intervenes. Not because the person was evil, not because the relationship was haram in an obvious way, but because your attachment was becoming unhealthy for your soul. You start expecting from people what only Allah can give. You expect constant reassurance. You expect emotional security. You expect stability. You expect peace. You expect healing. And when they don't provide it perfectly, you feel broken, angry, abandoned. That reaction exposes something important. Your heart was leaning too heavily on creation. Allah never wanted that. Understand this clearly. Allah does not compete with people for your heart. He owns it. And when something starts taking a place that belongs only to Him, Allah removes it, not out of jealousy, but out of mercy. Think about it honestly. How much of your emotional energy was tied to them? How much of your mood depended on their words, their attention, their presence? How much peace did you lose when they were distant? How much anxiety did you feel at the thought of losing them? That wasn't love strengthening you. That was attachment weakening you. And Allah saw it long before you did. You may say, but I loved them for the sake of Allah. Be honest with yourself. If it was purely for Allah, it would not have shaken your faith this deeply when it ended. Pain is natural. Grief is human. But when loss starts to shake your trust in Allah, it means the attachment crossed a line. Allah breaks attachments before they become idols. Yes, idols don't always look like statues. Sometimes they look like people. Sometimes they look like relationships. Sometimes they look like someone you can't imagine living without. And Allah, in His mercy, refuses to let your heart bow to anything other than Him. That's why the removal feels violent. That's why it feels sudden. That's why it feels like something was ripped out of you. Because your heart was holding on too tightly. If Allah had left that attachment untouched, it would have grown stronger. And the stronger it grew, the weaker your reliance on Allah would have become. Your du'as would slowly shift from sincere surrender to emotional bargaining. Your worship would become conditional on how life felt. Your faith would depend on someone staying. Allah will not allow your faith to be that fragile. So He intervenes. And here's the part you don't want to hear, but need to hear. Sometimes Allah removes people not because they are a distraction today, but because they would become one tomorrow. Allah sees where your heart was heading. He sees how dependent you would become. He sees the compromises you would make emotionally. He sees how much power that person would gain over your peace, your iman, your decisions, and Allah cuts it off early before it corrupts you deeply. You think Allah took something from you. In reality, Allah saved you from yourself. This is why after the separation, you feel exposed. You feel empty. You feel like you don't know how to function the same way. That emptiness is not punishment. It's detox. Your heart is relearning how to turn back to its true source. For the first time in a long time, you are forced to sit with Allah without distractions. No messages to wait for. No validation to chase. No emotional crutch to lean on. Just you and Allah. And that silence is uncomfortable, but it's necessary. Because now your dua changes. Now your reliance deepens. Now your sujood becomes honest. Now you stop pretending that people can save you. Now you remember that peace does not come from being held by someone. It comes from being held by Allah. Allah didn't remove them to hurt you. He removed them because your heart was drifting, and He loved you enough to pull it back. If Allah had not intervened, you would have kept calling it love while slowly losing your strength. You would have kept calling it comfort while quietly weakening your faith. You would have kept calling it connection while your heart disconnected from its Lord. Allah will never allow that if He truly loves you. So stop seeing the removal as rejection. Stop seeing it as punishment. Stop seeing it as loss. See it for what it really is: a correction, a mercy, a return. Allah removed what was pulling your heart away so He could bring your heart back to where it belongs. And if you let this lesson settle inside you, you will emerge stronger, calmer, and more grounded than you've ever been. Because when Allah is your center again, nothing else has the power to destroy you. Listen closely, because this lesson is where people lie to themselves. Allah removes people who were meant for a season, not a lifetime. Your pain didn't come from the ending. It came from the assumption. You assumed permanence where Allah only promised a phase. You assumed continuity where Allah planned completion. And when the door closed, you called it loss, even though Allah calls it timing. Not everyone who enters your life is meant to stay. Some people are sent to awaken you. Some are sent to support you briefly. Some are sent to expose wounds you didn't know you had. Some are sent to teach you what you will no longer tolerate. And once that purpose is fulfilled, Allah removes them. Keeping them longer would only confuse the lesson. But you resist this truth because you confuse intensity with destiny. Just because the connection was deep does not mean it was permanent. Just because the bond felt powerful does not mean it was meant to last forever. Some seasons are intense precisely because they are short. Allah compresses lessons into limited time so they leave an imprint. You didn't lose something eternal. You completed something necessary. This is where people suffer unnecessarily. They keep revisiting memories, replaying moments, asking what they could have done differently, as if the ending was a failure. It wasn't. The lesson reached its conclusion. You are only hurting yourself by demanding a continuation Allah never wrote. Understand this clearly. If someone was meant to stay, Allah would have placed the capacity for growth, patience, and alignment on both sides. When one person grows and the other resists, when one evolves and the other remains stagnant, the season ends. Allah does not force people to grow together when their paths are diverging. You're not being punished. You're being redirected. Some people are compatible with the version of you that existed at that time. When Allah starts shaping you into someone stronger, wiser, and more grounded, that compatibility disappears. And instead of allowing tension, resentment, and decay, Allah removes the relationship cleanly. Clean endings feel brutal because you didn't expect them. You expected gradual distance. You expected warnings. You expected closure that made sense emotionally. But Allah doesn't always give emotional closure. Sometimes He gives spiritual clarity later, and that requires patience. Here's the hard truth you avoid. If that person was truly meant for your lifetime, their absence would not have brought you closer to Allah. It would have destroyed you spiritually. Instead, what happened? Your heart hurts, but your awareness is growing. Your dependence on Allah is increasing. Your understanding is deepening. That's not loss, That's alignment. Stop labeling a completed season as a mistake. Stop calling something temporary a failure. A bridge is not flawed because it doesn't become a house. It served its function, you crossed it. Now you're on the other side. Allah removes seasonal people because keeping them beyond their time creates stagnation. You would stop evolving. You would stop questioning. You would stop growing. Comfort would replace consciousness. Familiarity would replace faith. Allah refuses to let your life plateau. So He closes the chapter. And yes, it hurts. Because endings always hurt when you attach permanence to what was temporary. But that pain is not proof you lost something irreplaceable. It's proof you valued the lesson. And one day, when you're stronger and clearer, you'll look back without bitterness. You won't crave their return. You won't need answers. You'll simply understand. They were not meant to walk the whole road with you. They were meant to walk you to a certain point, hand you a lesson, and leave so you could continue forward without confusion. Accept the season for what it was. Thank Allah for the role it played, and move forward without dragging a closed chapter into the next one. Because what Allah has written for you next cannot coexist with what already served its time. Listen carefully, because this lesson challenges the way you judge pain. Allah removes people to protect you from harm you cannot see. Right now, all you see is what you lost. You see the absence, you feel the silence. You remember the comfort, the familiarity, the sense of security you thought that person gave you. And because you only see today, you assume Allah took something good away from you. But Allah does not operate in moments. He operates in outcomes. You are judging the removal based on how it feels now. Allah allowed it based on where it was going to lead. There are dangers Allah hides from you out of mercy. Futures, He never allows you to enter. Paths, He blocks without explanation. And if Allah showed you everything He saved you from, you would fall into sujood out of gratitude. Some harm does not arrive immediately. It arrives slowly, quietly, after attachment deepens, after dependence grows, after leaving becomes much harder. Allah removes people early because later would destroy you. You say, but they cared about me. Allah says, I know what they would become. You say, but they were good to me. Allah says, I know what they would cost you. You say, but I could have handled it. Allah says, I know what would have broken you. You don't see the compromises you were about to make. You don't see how much of yourself you would slowly erase just to keep the connection alive. You don't see the boundaries you would cross, the standards you would lower, the self-respect you would sacrifice, all in the name of keeping someone who was never meant to stay. Allah sees all of it. Sometimes the harm is not abuse or betrayal. Sometimes the harm is erosion, the slow wearing down of your peace, the constant anxiety, the emotional instability, the inner conflict, the confusion between what pleases Allah and what pleases a person. That kind of harm is subtle, but it is dangerous. Allah removes people before the harm becomes obvious, because once harm becomes obvious, the damage is already done. Your heart is already wounded. Your trust is already shaken. Your iman is already exhausted. So Allah intervenes early. And because you cannot see the danger, you misinterpret the mercy as cruelty. Understand this truth. If Allah allowed the removal, it means the future with them contains something your heart could not carry, something your soul was not meant to endure, something that would have pulled you away from peace, dignity, or faith. Allah does not protect loudly. He protects quietly. He removes conversations before they turn poisonous. He ends connections before they turn bitter. He separates hearts before resentment replaces affection. He breaks attachments before they destroy you. You think Allah took away your safety. In reality, Allah was your safety. And here is the hardest part to accept. Sometimes Allah removes people not because they would hurt you intentionally, but because they would hurt you unintentionally. Good people can still cause great damage when they are not aligned with your destiny. Intentions do not cancel consequences. Allah judges outcomes, not just intentions. That is why you must stop obsessing over what could have been. The future you are grieving was never safe for you. It was an illusion built on what you wanted, not on what Allah knew. One day, clarity will replace confusion. Distance will bring understanding, and you will realize that the pain you felt from the removal was far less than the pain you would have felt if Allah had allowed it to continue. Until then, trust this without needing proof. Allah does not remove protection and then abandon you. He removes harm and then strengthens you. What you lost was not your future. It was a threat to it. Listen carefully, because this lesson explains the loneliness you didn't expect. Allah removes people to rebuild your strength. There are parts of you that never surface when life is comfortable. As long as you have someone to lean on, someone to reassure you, someone to carry emotional weight with you, your deeper strength stays dormant, not because you are weak, but because you are supported. And Allah, when He wants to raise you, removes the support so the strength can finally emerge. You didn't become weaker after they left. You became exposed. And exposure feels like weakness, but it isn't. When people leave, the silence becomes loud. You feel the absence in the smallest moments. The times you would have shared something, asked for advice, or leaned on their presence. Now there is no one to fill that space. And for the first time, you are forced to face yourself without distractions. This is where rebuilding begins. Allah creates moments in your life where you have no choice but to turn inward and upward. You start having conversations with Allah that you never had when people were around. Your du'as stop being routine and start being real. Your reliance stops being theory and becomes necessity. That is not coincidence. Allah does not strengthen people in crowds. He strengthens them in isolation. Every prophet was prepared in solitude before being entrusted with responsibility. Musa was alone before his mission. Muhammad was alone in the cave before revelation. Not because Allah wanted loneliness, but because strength is forged away from noise. Right now, Allah is teaching you how to stand without leaning. You are learning how to calm yourself without external reassurance, how to regulate your emotions without someone stabilizing them for you, how to find peace without depending on a person's presence. These are not soft skills. These are survival skills for the soul. You might feel like you're barely holding yourself together, but look closely. You are still praying. You are still functioning. You are still showing up. That means strength is already forming, even if it doesn't feel heroic yet. Allah rebuilds you quietly. He lets you struggle just enough to discover your capacity. He lets you feel the weight just enough to expand your endurance. He does not overwhelm you. He calibrates the pressure perfectly. If Allah had not removed them, you would never know how strong you actually are. You would keep borrowing strength instead of developing your own. And borrowed strength collapses when the source disappears. Allah wants your strength to be internal, not conditional. This is why after loss, you start noticing changes. You become more grounded, less reactive, more reflective. You stop needing immediate answers. You start trusting your own judgment. You begin to rely on Allah first, not last. That transformation does not happen while leaning on people. It happens when Allah becomes your primary support. So if you feel alone right now, understand this clearly. Allah did not abandon you. He removed training wheels. And one day, you will look back and realize that the moment you thought you were breaking was the moment you were being rebuilt from the inside out. Strong enough to stand. Strong enough to choose. Strong enough to trust Allah without needing constant reassurance from people. That is not loss. That is preparation. Listen carefully, because this lesson confronts a truth you may be avoiding. Allah removes people who are blocking your growth. Not everyone who loves you wants you to rise. Not everyone who supports you is capable of supporting the next version of you. Some people are comfortable with who you were, not with who Allah is shaping you to become. And when you begin to change, those people feel threatened, even if they don't admit it. Growth disrupts dynamics. When Allah elevates you, it shifts roles. You start seeing more clearly. You start setting boundaries. You start questioning patterns you once tolerated. You stop shrinking yourself to keep peace. And suddenly, relationships that felt stable begin to crack. Not because you became arrogant, not because you became distant, but because you stopped staying small. Some people only know how to relate to you when you are dependent, available, and emotionally accessible on their terms. The moment you grow stronger, they feel replaced, irrelevant, or exposed. Instead of rising with you, they resist you. Allah does not allow your growth to be negotiated. If someone cannot walk with you without pulling you backward, Allah removes them. Because your destiny cannot be fulfilled while dragging resistance behind you. Here is the uncomfortable truth. You were outgrowing them, and Allah made it official. You may have tried to carry them with you. You may have explained yourself. You may have compromised your pace to keep them comfortable. But growth cannot be slowed without consequences. If you stay too long in a space that no longer fits you, stagnation sets in. Allah values your development more than your comfort. Some relationships subtly limit you. They discourage ambition. They normalize mediocrity. They reinforce old fears. They remind you of who you used to be instead of who you're becoming. And slowly, without realizing it, you stop reaching higher because it creates tension. Allah sees that tension. He sees how much you suppress yourself just to maintain harmony. He sees how you dim your light so others don't feel insecure. And because Allah created you to expand, not to shrink, He removes the limitations. This is why the separation feels confusing. You didn't leave because of hatred. You didn't outgrow them intentionally. You simply evolved. And evolution creates distance when growth is not mutual. Allah removes people who cannot meet you at the level He is calling you to. If He didn't, you would remain stuck in a version of yourself that no longer reflects who you are becoming. Your potential would stay dormant. Your courage would weaken. Your purpose would blur. Allah refuses to let that happen. So He removes what holds you back, even if you're emotionally attached to it. Understand this clearly. The removal was not about punishment. It was about alignment. Allah is clearing your path so you can walk it without resistance. And one day, you will thank Allah for the space He created, because in that space, you will finally grow freely, without apology, without guilt, without compromise. That is not rejection, that is elevation. Listen carefully, because this lesson reshapes how you see yourself. Allah removes people so you learn your worth. When someone leaves your life, the first instinct is not reflection, it is self-doubt. You start replaying conversations, questioning your words, your actions, your tone, your effort. You wonder what you could have done differently to make them stay. And without realizing it, you place your value in their hands. That is exactly what Allah wants to correct. Your worth was never meant to be negotiated through someone's presence or absence. It was never meant to be proven by how hard you tried, how much you gave, or how much you tolerated. But as long as someone stayed, you could avoid facing how much of your self-respect depended on being chosen. When Allah removes them, that illusion collapses. You are forced to sit with an uncomfortable question. Why did their leaving make you feel smaller? Why did it make you feel unworthy, unlovable, or replaceable? The pain exposes where you tied your dignity to external validation. Allah allows this separation so you stop shrinking yourself for acceptance. So you stop over-explaining your boundaries. So you stop begging for clarity, consistency, or effort that should have been freely given. He is teaching you that someone walking away does not reduce your value. It reveals their capacity. If you truly lacked worth, Allah would not protect you from relationships that required self-betrayal to survive. Look at what you were willing to tolerate before the removal. The silences you excused, the disrespect you rationalized, the emotional imbalance you normalized. You called it patience, loyalty, or love, but Allah saw it differently. He saw you undervaluing yourself in the hope of being chosen. Allah does not allow His servant to be humiliated indefinitely. So He intervenes. He removes the situation that forces you to abandon your standards. He removes the dynamic that teaches you to accept less than you deserve. And He does it in a way that leaves no room for negotiation, because if there was, you would negotiate yourself out of dignity. This is why chasing after what Allah removed feels humiliating, not because you are weak, but because your soul knows you are crossing a boundary meant to protect you. Allah is teaching you that dignity comes from knowing when to let go, not from convincing someone to stay. Your worth is not proven by being needed. It is proven by being able to walk away without losing yourself. When Allah removes people, He forces you to confront the parts of you that were afraid of being alone, the parts that confused attachment with value, the parts that believed love required self-sacrifice at the expense of self-respect. And once you face that, something shifts. You stop chasing explanations. You stop needing closure from people who cannot give it. You stop internalizing rejection as a reflection of your value. You begin to stand differently, speak differently, choose differently. Allah is teaching you to see yourself the way He sees you, as someone worthy of respect, as someone deserving of peace, as someone whose value does not decrease because someone walked away. This lesson is painful because it dismantles illusions, but it is necessary because it restores dignity. And when dignity returns, desperation disappears. That is why Allah removed them, not to break you, but to teach you who you are. Listen carefully, because this lesson ties everything together. Allah removes people to make room for what is better. As long as you keep holding on to what Allah has already removed, you block what He is trying to give you next. Your hands stay full, your heart stays occupied, your mind stays stuck in a chapter that has already ended. And Allah does not place new blessings on top of old attachments. You think letting go means losing something familiar. Allah knows holding on would cost you something greater. There are doors Allah cannot open for you while you are standing in front of the wrong one, knocking, hoping it will reopen. Some opportunities, relationships, and forms of peace require space. They require emotional availability. They require clarity. And Allah creates that space by removing what no longer belongs. What you lost was not the best Allah had for you. It was what you were attached to at the time. If it were truly meant for you, it would not have required Allah to pull it away. It would have grown with you, strengthened your faith, and expanded your life without compromising your peace. What Allah is preparing for you will not leave you constantly anxious, questioning your worth, or confused about your place. Better does not always arrive immediately. Allah often allows a period of emptiness after removal, not to punish you, but to cleanse you, to reset your expectations, to refine your discernment. If something new arrived too quickly, you would compare it to what you lost. You would judge it through the lens of attachment, not clarity. So Allah makes you wait. In that waiting, you heal, you mature. You see more clearly what you need and what you no longer want. You become less emotionally impulsive and more spiritually grounded. And by the time what Allah has written arrives, you are no longer the same person who would have mishandled it. What Allah brings next will not need to be forced. It will not need chasing. It will not need constant reassurance. It will fit naturally into your life because it aligns with who you have become. You are not being delayed. You are being prepared. Every removal is intentional. Every ending creates capacity. Every closed chapter is making room for something more aligned with your faith, your dignity, and your future. So stop looking back as if something was stolen from you. Nothing that Allah removes is ever truly yours to begin with. What is written for you will come without struggle, without humiliation, and without costing you your peace. Trust the process, even when you don't see the outcome yet. Allah is not taking away from you. He is clearing the path. Listen carefully and let this settle in your heart. If Allah took them out of your life, it was not an accident. And it was not cruelty, it was precision. Allah does not remove without purpose, and He does not close doors without protecting what is ahead of you. You were not abandoned, you were redirected. You were not rejected, you were preserved. What left was never stronger than what is coming, and what ended was never greater than what Allah is preparing. Stop measuring Allah's wisdom by the pain of the moment. Pain does not mean punishment. Pain often means transformation. The discomfort you feel now is proof that something inside you is changing, strengthening, realigning. Do not chase what Allah removed. Do not beg for what Allah ended. Do not reopen doors Allah closed with His own hand. Every time you try to pull it back, you delay your healing and block your growth. Trust this, even if your heart resists it. Allah sees what you cannot see. He knows what you could not handle. He protected you in ways you will only understand later. One day, you will look back at this moment with clarity instead of confusion, with gratitude instead of grief. And you will say with certainty that Allah knew exactly what He was doing. Until that day, hold on to this truth. What Allah removes is never a loss. It is a release. And what He is preparing will not require you to lose yourself to keep it. Place your trust in Him completely. He has never failed you, and He never will.